Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Chat EbT. I'm your host, Ebrahim Tayob. Now today, we're speaking about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. It's something that's so important, yet it's spoken about so little. I'm talking, of course, about the topic around mental well-being. And of course, today I've got with me the CEO and co-founder of Ayza Health, Zah'ra Moosa. Zah'ra, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a wonderful opportunity to be here, and I'm so excited to be discussing this.
So, as mentioned, you the co-founder and CEO of Ayza Health. Tell us a little bit more about the organization.
Yes, absolutely. So, Ayza Health, we are a mental health clinic, and we're based in Sandton. And I co-founded it with my family, of course, Professor Zah'ra Moosa, who is a medical doctor and academic, and my mother, who is the clinic director. And we treat patients coming in with suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other mental health issues. And we use the innovative breakthrough treatment of ketotherapy, where we have found significant improvement and results in their journey.
Wow, that's actually quite amazing. Can you tell us a little bit more about ketotherapy? It's actually the first time I'm hearing that phrase.
Yes, of course. So it's an infusion-based treatment that has found to increase the neuroplasticity in the brain, which works on the NMDA receptors, blocking those in the glutamate system. Essentially, it helps reconnect the brain, break out of old mental patterns, and help rewire your thoughts and your brain. So it has shown to reduce depressive symptoms, elevate mood, improve cognition, improve memory, and people have found amazing results, including myself, of course, which is what inspired the co-founding of Ayza Health.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that. So I was actually going to ask you that. So I always love talking. It's one of my favorite topics here on the podcast is the word pivot, right? So as I understand, you were a CA. Well, you still are a CA,
Yes.
right? You worked in corporate. But now you open up a mental health clinic. I always say there's a story behind that. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, it's actually a little long story, but it started much before becoming a CA. I suffered with severe depression for many years, undiagnosed, where I had a lot of fatigue and brain fog. Of course, at the time, looking back now, I would say I had sadness that I never truly understood or thought that it mattered, because as suspected, we all go through highs and lows, and maybe that's what normal felt like. It wasn't until after I qualified as a CA 3 months into my secondment that my brain was just like, nope, I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't push myself without ignoring those feelings, those emotions, and those limiting beliefs. And it was a way of getting my attention to say that I need to deal with this, as it had overtaken my life. It was quite a severe and dark time, because what lay ahead with being diagnosed with depression at the time, I started treatments, therapies, medication. And while it seemed that things were getting temporarily better, it just seemed to go round and round into a loop. So I had worked initially for a year, and after that I thought to go out on my own. But when in isolation and being at home, I struggled to really do the most basic of tasks. You could say that things just got worse with time. The medication would give me intense mood swings. I had overwhelming emotions. I had chronic stress and anxiety to the point where I couldn't actually work. I couldn't concentrate for longer than an hour, and I was overwhelmed with intense sadness and feelings of low self-worth and low self-esteem. And while intellectually I'm aware that yes, these are just thoughts and these are just feelings, I could not shake myself off of it. And so it began just 7 years of darkness where nothing was getting better. And just thinking about it,
No, I can
you
imagine.
know, as much as I stand here before you today, and I'm very privileged and blessed to be here, it is the first time me openly talking about a very dark time where I was so derealized. I felt so separate from reality that it felt as if a dream. And I'm sure many viewers might be able to relate that the mental patterns, the thoughts, the thinking just wouldn't stop, the anxiety, and you know better, but you just don't know how to manage those feelings, and they won't go away. And in that time, I delved a lot into psychology and neuroscience, understanding conditioning and the belief system and how we operate, that often our thoughts leads a lot to our state of mind and our physical health. And I was determined to find a way to heal myself. So after years of struggling financially, losing friendships, feeling and being toxic at that time, because this is what heightens emotions do. You react a lot to situations without thinking. It was 3 years ago that I finally hit my breaking point. I sought out help and I discovered ketotherapy. And 3 years ago is when I underwent this treatment. And let's just say it was absolutely life-changing.
And what was that feeling like? That, for the lack of a better term, I'm going to use the word awakening, right? Because as you mentioned, it was like you just were reborn, essentially, right? What was that awakening feeling like?
Yeah, so actually, scientifically, ketotherapy works on the synapses and allows increased neuroplasticity to make better patterns, and it's improving the brain health because chronic stress, cortisol, alcohol, any other substances, and just our general daily life can lead to those neural circuits being stuck in those rigid patterns, and of course the belief patterns. And what it does is help the nervous system recalibrate, as well as help a person feel connected to their body. Experientially, from my point of view, it was as if I came back into my body. I could finally feel those aches and pains and all the feelings that I chose to ignore and I became numb to. I allowed myself to feel a lot more. So instead of reacting and pushing away these feelings, I was able to allow these feelings to move through me and understand it better. It was sort of a homecoming, you could say.
You know, I really like what you said there, right? I think it's very important, and I want to touch on that a little bit more. As you said, that instead of, running away from those feelings, you sort of accepted them and brought them in and then worked from there. And I think that's very interesting because I think that's a very common problem. People that talk about depression, or people that talk about anxiety, or people that talk about ADHD, it's always something that, hey, we need to escape that and we need to run away from that. But whenever you hear about these things, they always say, the first step is always accepting the issue at hand and then working from there. But I think that doesn't happen very often. I think a lot of people, like I said, just want to run away from it and try and escape it more than anything else. But I think you have to sort of let it in and then build from there.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. Growing up, the way we grew up in our culture, it's to push away those feelings, suck it up, and everyone's got issues, deal with it. So that conditioning tends to push us away from being vulnerable, even with ourselves, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And while I struggled with depression, I look back and I think, yes, there was a lot of emotions and thoughts and feelings that I just pushed aside, I ignored, because I had strong willpower, and I still do, to say ignore. And after ketotherapy, and even prior, while I was delving into psychology and just understanding how as a human being we should function, what's healthy, what's normal, is when you have an emotion, embrace it, acknowledge it, it exists.
Yeah.
By accepting that we feel a certain way, it's not to say that this is how we're always going to feel. And when we allow that emotion to rise, to feel it, not resist it, that is when you can really let it go, let it move through you. And it's really an emotion is bringing light to something that needs to be felt, heard, acknowledged, dealt with. Say, for example, you have a feeling of, I don't like it here at work, or I don't like what I do. Part of you is saying, okay, well, we can feel our feelings. Doesn't feel nice, because denial is just keeping the problem at bay. You know, what you resist persists.
You know, one of the really good things that I think has come up over the last 5 or 10 years has been the increase in mental well-being awareness, whether it be in corporate, whether it be with the youth in schools. Why do you think that change has happened? Why do you think there's such a big uptake in mental well-being awareness these days?
But when you have none of those distractions, you're left with sitting and paying attention and spending time with your loved ones that you might have only had limited interactions with.
Yeah.
And to really realize that, okay, I find it hard to be around people too much, or around this one person, or they make me feel a certain way. What happens usually is we are free to run away at any time. The society that we live in, I don't like this person, block. I don't like that, ignore.
Yeah.
And you just ignore. But when you're faced with your feelings, you have no choice but to deal with that. That's when you realize, oh, okay, there's more brewing underneath there. And then that gives rise to panic, of course, because you don't know what to do with that now.
And there's no escape. You're stuck in
Yes.
your house. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Oh, very, very true. I want to go back to what you mentioned about your story. So firstly, thank you so much for sharing that with us. As you mentioned, it's one of the first times that you've spoken about that. We really, really appreciate it. And the reason why I bring it up is because, Shukar, you've been very successful on getting through that and now being on the other side of it, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't, right? And I think it comes down to people don't know where to start. People don't know how to react. If you had to speak or give a little bit of advice to those people that are, sitting in that little bit of a rut, that identify that there is that problem, but just don't know how to take action towards it, what would that be?
I would say for someone who has identified the problem, that is a good start, because you're no longer in denial. It's okay to not be okay, and to know that there is hope and there is something that you can do about it. The question is, why might you be having limitations in reaching out, or you feeling stuck? I would assume it's the fear. The fear that you see this as a weakness, or that others might see it as a weakness, because I've been there. I know what that feels like. People will tell you it's all in your head, or dismiss you, or say that, oh no, it's not that bad, for example. But I would urge you to trust yourself and start off small, maybe just with a friend that you can trust, who will listen to you without judgment, and for you to listen to yourself to better understand what you're going through. And depending on where you're at, if you're identified it's a significant problem, I would say that's what Ayza Health is here for. Reach out to us. We can talk about those next steps. Or if that seems too drastic and serious, then reach out to SADAG or a registered counselor, where they have free support and no expectations. You're just talking to an expert who understands what you might be going through, and you need to feel supported and safe in this journey, because that was my biggest struggle. I had to do it alone, and you shouldn't have to do it alone. You don't need to do it alone. That there are places, safe places, for you to feel seen, heard, and respected, and know that it's not a weakness, you're not to blame, it's not in your head, that is brain health. And sometimes, because of conditioning, genetics, or life experiences, we suffer with our mental health. We wouldn't shame anyone for going to see a cardiologist, for example. So you should still see it in that way. Do not identify with I'm broken, because you might be thinking that I'm broken, I'm damaged, and I'm just like this. For a long time, I thought the same thing, that I'm stuck this way. It's just who I am, I can't change. Until I realized scientifically that when we change our beliefs, we change our identity that self-identity, we can change who we are and what we experience. So thereby, sometimes our conscious efforts were not enough. I knew I had to stop thinking these things. But maybe it's not your lack of willpower or lack of discipline to say that you want to. You probably don't want to be that way. You want to be better. But guess what? Your brain might be holding you back.
Yeah. And you know, the other side of that coin is I think that people don't really even realize sometimes that they are struggling from these things, or rather how deep some of these things go. To give you an example, like I was diagnosed, late stage diagnosis. I got diagnosed when I was 32 with ADHD, right? It's something I always sort of thought I had, and it was something that I always sort of pushed away, as we mentioned. But then I decided, you know what, it's time to start looking into this. And obviously went to a psychologist, got diagnosed, and then I started doing a little bit more research about it because I wanted to know a little bit more about it. And whenever people talk about ADHD, all they talk about is the attention deficit part. You know, oh, this child is hyper, or this person can't keep attention, or this person can't sit still. And that's my perception of it. That was my perception of it, rather. And then I started looking into it, and I realized how much deeper that went. And I realized that there were problems that I was facing, or things that I was always struggling with, that I didn't even realize were related to my ADHD. And it was sort of like this drop in the ocean. You know, the attention part was like this drop in the ocean. There was so much of a wider aspect. And I think that's become a really big thing, is because we see these very high-functioning people that are suffering with anxiety, that are suffering with depression, ADHD, suicidal thoughts you mentioned. But from the outside, they look perfectly capable. They look very happy. They are always the life of the party. But behind closed doors, it's a very different conversation. And I think we always have those stigmas that, like ADHD, oh, you know what, it's person can't sit still. With depression, oh, this person never wants to go out, and they're tired, and they, you know, don't want to talk, and so on and so forth. Anxious is this person that's like jittery and all of that. There's so much of that, but we don't actually see the other side, that there's a whole ocean that we don't see, that we don't even know that's there. And I think that's also a big part of the problem. I think we looking in, or when you're looking at a family member, we sometimes say, oh, how can this person be depressed? They always jovial. But there's always something behind that as well. And I think that's the part that we need to bring a little bit more forward and create a little bit more awareness of.
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you so much for taking the opportunity to be vulnerable and to say it in this space. It's very brave of you. And I say that because I know how hard it is to be able to admit this to ourselves and to everyone else, that this is how I am, you know. And even resorting to the labels, I don't actually believe in labels anymore, when I've come to realize that everyone's brain is different. And you're 100% correct that people tend to get labeled of, oh, he's doesn't pay attention, or restless, or I had been called, you're so lazy, you're tired all the time.
Yep, me too.
Meanwhile, maybe it's not the person themselves, but it's their brain. It's their brain and how it's been programmed over years, and the circuitry that goes on inside of it. And when we look at that as, okay, this person, they've had this sort of life situation, how can, you know, something as innovative, this breakthrough treatment, ketotherapy, what could it do for people? It allows them to, you know, snap out of it, because I went from being lazy, not being able to think, to now I can recall information. Does that mean that it was me? I guess not. And it's brain health. You know, a lot of the time I was a high-functioning, suffering with high-functioning depression as well. I could push myself, and it looks fine on the outside, but you would know on the inside. Are you always stressed? Are you always overthinking? Do you have racing thoughts? Do you trouble with sleep? Do you have trouble with sleep? These are the factors that one must look at to say, oh, okay, I know I've been living with it, because yes, you found a way to live despite those challenges. You found a way to work around it, and you should be proud of that. But maybe you don't have to have those challenges to begin with. Maybe you're not stuck having racing thoughts. Maybe you don't have to believe that I'm always anxious, I'm always stressed out. You can regulate your nervous system. You can find a way to relax your body and your mind and perform even better than what you had with those challenges. I hope that answers your question.
No, definitely. Yeah, because I fully agree with you. I think, while you were saying that, example, and I always like to use examples, it's just the way I process things. But effectively, it's like saying, hey, I sit in an hour of traffic every day. There's this other route that I found that's going to take me 30 minutes, but hey, I've managed in that hour of traffic all this time. I should just stick that out. No, there is a much faster, much easier, much simpler route available to you. You just need to take that turn, I guess.
I love the analogy, absolutely. I also like to think of our brains as the car. We're driving. When it feels that we're having depression, anxiety, PTSD, it feels like we're not thinking about where we're going. We're just driving, pushing the accelerator, and pushing that engine fast-paced without giving our car a service. That's how we treat our brains, right? We ignore the stresses and the traumas. We ignore the fact that we haven't been sleeping regularly for a very long time, or that we're just feeling this way and it's like, it's normal, I'm used to it. But what if you can feel peace? What if that is available to you? I mean, you should consider that it doesn't have to be this way. And I say this because I lived with being depressed for nearly 15 years before I was diagnosed. And if I think that I could have went back in time to say, hey, actually, you're not okay, these are the indicators, you should do something about it. It's okay to seek help. I would have saved myself a lot of hassle, a lot of pain, and a lot of trouble. Don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait until you're forced to face those facts.
Very, very true. And I want to actually add something to that, because I feel like this is very important, but not only for the person themselves, but I think for the people around them. Don't wait. And I always love telling this story, and it was a very, very pivotal moment for me. COVID, there was a time when I was going through a little bit of a rough patch, and in all honesty, things were just very, very difficult. I had a friend that has been one of my closest friends from the time I was in grade 4. So from 9 years old, this guy's been my friend. And till today, we talk every single week. Ironically, I spoke to him this morning, right? And I would always talk to him. And I remember the one day I told him, I actually think I'm going through a bit of a depression. And he told me, and I'll never forget these words, and he told me, Ebrahim, I've known you for so many years. You've been in a depression for quite some time now, because I speak to you every week. I can see the changes. And it was that moment where I was like, oh, okay, wow, I need to go do something about this. And that's why I say, like, similar to what you're saying, is to that individual, stand up, yes, but to the people around them as well, to the friends, to the families, you have that ability to step in. Maybe that person doesn't realize they're going through something, but you see them every day. You see the different tics, you see the different characteristics. And a lot of people, again, sometimes you just go through life because you don't think anything is wrong. Might just be a little thing that's happening here and there. But you might be noticing, the family or friends, spouses might be noticing. So like you urge that person to stand up and get that help, following up on that, I really urge friends, family, colleagues, stand up as well. And it's never wrong to tell somebody, hey, I've noticed something and I think you should get some help, or I think you should talk about it, so on and so forth.
I would encourage family to reach out to their loved ones that are suffering with compassion, without judgment, and without blame, and saying, you're having a hard time, it's not your fault, But you don't have to do it alone, and there can be a better way that gives you the strength to handle things better. Because most times people will be like, oh, you're a mess right now, or you're too anxious, you need to go get checked up, like, oh, you're a handful, like something's wrong with you. I've experienced that. That's how people tend to react sometimes. And I would say the best way to handle mental health issues is with love, with compassion, and without judgment. That we all have our struggles, that it is this way right now, but it doesn't have to be. It
Very,
can
very true.
change.
No, completely agree. Before we get to the end, one thing I wanted to say is, for somebody that's watching this and they'd like to get in touch with Ayza Health, what's the process? How does the whole system work? How does the therapy work?
Okay, that's an interesting question, yes. For anyone who's interested in this infusion-based treatment, they can find us on ayzahealth.co.za, and they can sign up for a free call where they can hear more about the treatment and how it works. Something that I realized a few years back, what many psychologists or therapists tend to do is refer to a PHQ-9 or GAD-7, which is sort of a questionnaire that is according to the DSM manual. And a lot of the times it's sort of like a mini test to see whether or not you might have mild to severe anxiety, whether you might be suffering from PTSD, or whether you have depression or it's major depression, It sort of gives you an indicator. And we have this assessment that we utilize at Ayza Health, but it is also on our website. And that can just give you an indicator on, okay, if this is how it's measured, let's see if, it is bad or it's not bad. It helps you to know where you're at. And it's a general guideline. It's not set in stone, but it can be helpful for anyone who is not sure of what they might be going through, like if they haven't been diagnosed just yet.
Zah'ra, I can't thank you enough for coming onto the show, sharing your story with us. As you mentioned, it's one of the first times that you shared it, so I really appreciate that and appreciate you taking the time and talking to us about this, because as we mentioned, it's just so important, and it's such an important topic that unfortunately, although there is more awareness, it's still not spoken about enough. So once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. Thank you once again for joining us on another episode of Chat EbT. Like I said, this is a topic that's so near and dear to my heart. So if you are struggling, if a family member is struggling, reach out, speak up. You never know. There's so many possibilities for you right around the corner. My name is Ebrahim Tayob, and you're watching Chat EbT. Until next time.